Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here again. During Gulf Food, I'm sure we are all busy looking at the products of many countries where food is it's no longer an accessory, it's a must-have for all of us, and it's becoming a concern day by day. Defining the food security, because there are so many interpretations that I have seen, but looking at from the World Food Summit, they have defined it in a very nice, succinct way. Food security exists when all people, at all times, have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So that's the broad definition. And if we talk about what are the factors that affect our food consumptions, there are two factors. The first one is the GDP per capita. As we can see in GCC, there is an increase that we are reaching around 33,000 US dollars as the GDP per capita, and this is in a rise of an average of 8% since 2007 till 2012. So it's in a good sign. We are financially in a good situation. But if you look at the consumption, as you know, the higher the GDP, the higher the consumption, so they are directly proportional. If you look at GCC and in comparison to the other countries of higher GDP, GCC is consuming a lot of calories. This graph shows how much calories people consume per day, and we are the highest consumers of calories. That's why you see a lot of obesity and people with sugar, because there is a luxury of abundance of food, the availability of food. If you look at the demographic of the region, the population is increasing, and if you look at the 2010 population, tourists and GCC and the GCC, the people of GCC are in the equal level, around 40 and 40. The population will grow at steady rate of 2.6% up to 2020 as an estimation. But the tourist population, we expected it will increase by double the rate, by 4.6%. So the growth of tourists will be much more than the GCC population itself. That's by itself, it will increase the reliance on food consumptions. So we'll be consuming more food. The population of tourists will reach around total of 120 million. So that's the number itself shows that we should be ready for more food for the region. If you look at what can we do to meet these food consumption requirements? Basically, either we produce more or import more. Looking at the production in the GCC, the production, it is growing by 3%, the agricultural production of food in GCC. The highest one, the main driver is Saudi Arabia, due to their population and to their national strategy of focusing on food production. But one thing that we all know, even though the growth of the population at the same rate of almost the same rate of the growth of the agricultural production, but the variety is not that rich. Are we producing enough, the same good variety, like the basic principles of staples, rice and wheat? We are not. If you look at the UAE's top agricultural products, fruits, vegetables, milk, poultry, meat, and fish. Saudi Arabia is almost the same, but with different percentages. So the right variety, they are not being produced here. The right balance of the basic food requirements of people. So the domestic production is putting a strain on water resources. Because for us to produce more, we are affecting the underground water. We cannot rely heavily on the underground water. There is a shortage, there is a environmental dependence on that. So in Saudi government, they have issued a decree, which is 335 in 2008, to phase out domestic wheat production by 12.5% reduction annually, with an aim of terminating the domestic wheat production by 2016. 2016, there will no longer be wheat in Saudi Arabia. And that will affect the region as well. Domestic wheat production reduced from 1.7 million metric tons to estimated 0.6 million metric ton in 2013. So there's a reduction and it will stop. If you look at UAE, in 2010, our capital, Abu Dhabi, completely halted the production of Rogers grass, which, as you know, these grasses are very essential for horses and other cattle, for a simple reason. Why they halted? Because it's draining out 60% of the Emirates irrigation water in 2009. So there's a huge environmental impact here that negatively affecting our food production. We have less water, and if you look at our strong statement in Quran, without water, we can't do anything. There is no animal, there is no plant. So the food security, ladies and gentlemen, we are back to the basics. There is no water, there is no food, there is no food security. There's nothing will be alive. So this phrase from Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيًّا, it's a very true indication that without this, we are back to basics. We cannot ignore, no matter how we advance the technology, without water. So I would even expect the third world will be in water, but don't quote me on that. So as we said, either we produce or we import. Production, it has limitations due to the water. Importing, okay, GCC, we keep importing. We are very good consumers. We are happy, smiley consumers. But that should not be the strategy for us, the way forward. As you see, the imports are increasing at a rate of 10%. We are importing more and more. Saudi and UAE are being the highest importers of food. So there is a high reliance, and this will increase further and further up to 2020 and more. If you look at the macro level vulnerability of MENA region, and then we'll focus on GCC, what is the risk of food insecurity in GCC compared to others? If you look at all the countries, if you look at this in the first quadrant here, if you look at Egypt, they are less dependent on the grain import because they do some growing, some plantations, but they are fiscally stressed. Their financial situation is not good. If you look at Jordan, Lebanon, they are the most vulnerable because their grain import independence is so high, plus their fiscal balance or their strength, financial strength is not very strong. If you look at UAE, we are vulnerable to food insecurity, but the good news that we are fiscally sound. Our financial strength is backing us up. The least vulnerable one, as per this chart, is Iran, since they do produce and fiscally they are sound in their financial. So in GCC, we are in the upright quadrant. It's good, but it should not make us, very much relaxed, because we have to think of always solutions to food problems. Worldwide, as you know, in 2007, the world food prices increased dramatically, and the first and second quarter of 2008, creating a global crisis and causing political and economical instability and social unrest in both poor and developed countries. In 2011, as you know, things have changed. A lot of people were protesting because of their food shortage. Economists and researchers attribute the Arab Spring in 2011 to food price spike. As we know, the guy from Tunisia has fired the protests in Tunisia, and this was the first indication for the Arab Spring, because the guy was doing this for a survival. He's doing just to live. He was abandoned. He was stopped to sell food, and he was doing it for a simple living. And as per this economist, they are saying food price spike was the final nail in the coffin for regimes that were failing to deliver on their side of social contract. They have social obligations toward their citizens, but food prices are not being controlled, and this is making people go out of their way. In UAE government, they have looked at it, reacted positively. They have fixed the cost of about 400 foodstuff and household products at 70 outlets. For the mass public, it's a good news. Again, in March 2012, UAE fixed the prices of 1,650 basic commodities until end of 2012. So the UAE government is doing a lot to ensure that food is being served at a reasonable price, and the consumer can handle this. So what are the food securities initiatives other than that in UAE? The first federal food safety law is expected to be completely adopted by 2014, which will touch upon the food security part of it. UAE invested 258 million in food processing and packing machinery to support the food industry in 2011. There is a support to farmers, which they give them around 100,000 dirhams in Abu Dhabi to support them do their plantation and support the food industry. Also, as we know, the creation of free zone which subsidized least terms, tax exemptions, and with subsidized lease terms, tax exemption, and low utility cost This will support the development of the UAE food processing and other domestics. So, as per the Food and Agriculture Organization, there are dimensions and strategies for food securities, which will be my last slide. The first one is the availability. As we talked about importing, in GCC we import a lot. So import dependence is inevitable. We will continue importing. GCC must build an ample stockpiles, which will require efficient warehousing solutions. Agricultural investment in international markets. Saudi Arabia already invested in Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia. Qatar already invested in Australia and India. So GCC countries are looking outward. This also has a risk as well, because now you are at the ransom of others. Whatever political instability in their country, this will affect you. So we should look at all risk here. The other dimension of the food security is the accessibility. Is your country reachable, accessible by all the food exporters? In the good news in GCC, we are very much accessible by air and sea and land. All the Arabs countries send their trucks every day on the roads, supplying fruits and vegetables, and the others are getting from the sea and air. So increase the market access and ease of importation. We are good in that. Improved the port, road, and rail. Rail is coming. That will connect the entire GCC. This will ease the food importation and the flow of food in the Gulf region. Also increasing the transparency of agricultural market. This information flow, which my entity will play a role as Dubai Trade. We are looking at the soft part of the infrastructure, the data flow, the information flow, which will make all the information readily available to the consumers. The third dimension is the affordability. We talked about how UAE is intervening in making the prices affordable, making it at people's expectation, and not making it in the hands of a businessman and jacking the prices in a crazy way. So there's an insurance of price stability. Our oil strategy, that's a short term, that will mitigate the price risk that we might have in GCC. But our long term, as I said, for food security, we need to have a long term policy and a strategy where we have to diversify our economy and look at others. So we stay financially and fiscally strong. The last one is the utilization. I started my presentation that there are a lot of obesity in the region, a lot of sugar problems because of utilization, the culture of what to eat and when to eat and how to eat. This is the real problem, ladies and gentlemen. This, we have to look at this seriously, especially in GCC. We don't want our next generations to be just stagnant and they can't move. As we were taught when we were very young, a healthy brain will have a healthy body. And our Prophet Muhammad has given us very good advice that it's a simple, intuitive advice. You know, make your stomach 1/3 food, 1/3 water, and 1/3 air. Leave some space for air when you eat. And my last word here, I hope that we don't eat to live, but we live to eat. Thank you very much. I said that in a sarcastic way. So we live not to eat. We eat to live, not we live to eat.